Welcome to ViodiTV's real-time conversation. And today we're with Tanya Sullivan of Plus One Strategic Communications and Shirley Bloomfield of NTCA. Shirley and Tanya, welcome to this Friday, May 1st edition. And thank you very much for being here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
So we have no idea where people will be coming from. And so I think everyone in the world should know both of you, but maybe they don't. So Shirley, why don't you kick off and tell us a little bit about who you are and who NTCA is. And I'll pull up a website while you start that.
That is excellent. So Ken, delighted to join you here today to have a chat. And NTCA is the Rural Broadband Association. We represent about 850 community-based broadband providers across the country who do everything from voice service to video service to broadband to everything in between. So truly love the membership that we represent, and we cover about 6 states and about 35% of the landmass. So we spend most of our time thinking about how we can talk to policymakers about what is important in the broadband arena, as well as working to do education and training for our membership, and a whole host of other services in between.
That's a wonderful description.
And we have a really nice website.
You do, and that's a wonderful description to kind of get us started with one of the themes of today's conversation, which will be on this whole idea of virtual governance and what does it mean in this kind of this Zoom type video conference world. And you know, speaking of someone who's great at communications, that's you, Tanya, and the work you do at Plus One Strategic. Why don't you talk to what you do, and I'll pull up your slides.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for having me. Plus One Strategic Communications, we're a management consulting firm. We specialize in business development and communication strategies for a lot of Shirley's members. We focus primarily on the rural communications space. We really take great pride, and we do always work towards helping companies achieve their goals and provide superior customer experiences. That's really what our goal is at Plus One. I'm a proud member of NTCA and appreciate all the work that NTCA does to support the industry. We use NTCA as a wonderful platform in order to share our expertise, and happy to be in a discussion with one of my great friends and industry colleagues, Shirley and Ken. It's always great to see you.
And literally, we are seeing each other thanks to the wonders of telecommunications, and broadband, and of course, all the devices on each end. And one of the things that prompted this discussion was a tweet, appropriately enough, that Shirley sent several weeks ago, or maybe a week and a half ago, about the virtual legislative conference that you held. Why don't you talk to that for a moment?
Sure. So on an annual basis, NTCA actually has members fly into Washington, D.C., typically in the spring, and then we do one for executives in the fall when it's a non-election year. And what we do is we spend that time to gather our membership together to hear from policymakers, to hear from congressional staff, what their priorities are, to hear from members of Congress talking about what their committee activity is going to be, getting a snapshot into what will be the advocacy priorities for the year ahead. So it's a wonderful opportunity. And then what we typically do, Ken, is we unleash folks to spend a whole day up on Capitol Hill. So we work with them in advance to go meet with their members of Congress, to talk to their delegation, to tell their story, to share their challenges, to share their stories of innovation. And, it's really kind of a wonderful 1-2 punch. It gives us the chance to educate our membership in terms of how policymakers think and what is top of mind for them. And then it also allows that grassroots advocacy that we think is so powerful, because while we can sit here in DC every day and tell people what our members are doing, there is nothing quite like them hearing it directly from their constituents. There's one other advantage I will say of this conference that I typically love, and that is when you get somebody like, I'll never forget the first time we had Chairman Pai from the FCC, newly into his chairmanship, join us to speak to the NTCA membership, and he walked into the ballroom and he took one look at me, took one look at the group of people in that room, 550 or 600 of them, and he said, "Holy cow, you have a lot of people." And it's important for policymakers to realize that when we talk about who we represent, it's hundreds of providers, which represent tens of thousands of consumers, hundreds of thousands of consumers. That's really, really important for them to put that into perspective. Actually, millions of consumers, now that I'm thinking about the math. So it has a lot of benefits. So, obviously we couldn't do it live this year, and that was disappointing, but we pivoted quickly to think about what does a virtual legislative fly-in look like.
And so what does it look like?
So, we did it pretty quickly because obviously it was in the middle of April, and it was when the world was kind of turning on its side. So we had to kind of think through pretty quickly what were the things that people needed to hear, because even though we wanted to do it virtually, we also know that nobody has the patience to sit there for an 8-hour session online. I think we've all learned this over the course of the last month. But so we thought about who were the people they needed to hear from. How could we technologically do it? So we actually got members of Congress, about 4 of them, to film some specific messages for our members. And that was very powerful. And then we had different FCC staff and congressional staff kind of join in for live conversations. So, and then we had somebody from the Hill publication share with folks kind of a little bit of a snapshot into the upcoming election. So we were able to do that piece. It was the education piece. The piece that you need to go to Capitol Hill. So, you have to then turn around at the end of the conference and say to folks, all right, now you've heard all of this, you've got a lay of the land. Now what we need you to do is reach out to your member of Congress, even though it's just virtual and it's not in person, to share your perspective.
So from a that kind of interaction, assuming that the Congress folks are, I guess they're back at their home right now, but in a way it doesn't really matter because they probably have to physically distance the way we are. Are you seeing then that your members are going out and talking to them and kind of somehow still communicating that they're doing great things to keep America connected?
So I would say a couple of things on that front. One is that, yeah, it's a lot tougher because everybody is working from home, staff is working from home. But I think the key is being able to access, particularly the key congressional staff that staff these members of Congress. So, it's not like you can go to the town hall and have this discussion. It's not like you can meet back in the district. But I do think there have been some really creative ways members, NTCA members, have shared their stories. One has been social media. One of the things that we're finding is members of Congress and policymakers in general are having a fair amount of time to do things that they weren't traditionally doing because they spend all of their time in congressional hearings and in meetings with constituents.
Whoops, we might have lost a little bit of that, Shirley. You're kind of going in and out.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, so what I was just sharing is that social media has really filled an interesting void. So I think that, again, because your schedules are so different, they are following things in a different way. So one of the things, as an example, this morning I had a call with Chairman Pai at the FCC, and we were talking through a couple of things that are going on right now. And he said, I've really enjoyed following what your members are doing and the stories of innovation on social media. And that's really important. So we continue to encourage people, you're doing great stuff. You're hitching up your school kids for free. You're serving those people who've lost their jobs due to economic hardship with COVID. Share that story, put that on Twitter and tag your member of Congress. Tell them what you're doing. Trust me, they have more time to look at that now than they've had before, and that they will again. So now is the time to share those stories.
It's interesting. It goes directly to that member as opposed to staff too, I suppose.
One thing that I really liked.
Go ahead, Tanya.
One thing I really liked about the conference is that, sometimes we put our policymakers up on these pedestals as we should in many instances. but seeing them in their, home environment, like they're real people, they're in all of this too. I thought I thought that was very powerful. And to hear the staff members and talking and continuing the dialogue, for me, it just gave encouragement that, communication isn't stopping about the important issues. I registered for the event. I sat there for the whole thing, and that's encouraging.
See, and I'm relying on the cliff notes from you guys to tell me about it. But it does lead to the whole idea of, from a communications perspective, Tanya, what kind of pointers would you provide to members or to whoever, particularly when they're talking to folks in Congress or maybe policy regulators, things like that? What tips would you provide?
Well, obviously, Shirley is the expert on that. One thing that I have realized in this new kind of virtual world is that doing some of these types of events, especially when it's, a lot of content, is to get it done in the morning. A timing perspective is important to start your day with that, and you can plan around it. But I think we need to continue to do these things so we can keep as much of a human connection as possible by seeing people. We are missing the huge benefit of the networking and, talking to people. Nothing beats in person, but, how NTCA was able to pivot and provide this content and information. And another thing that I think is great is in these virtual platforms, this content lives for a while, so you can go back and reference it. So I think that that's a great point. I think it becomes a great resource for the staff on the Hill, so they can go back and see, oh yeah, this is what we talked about. It's not having to, remember, the speech or the notes that you were reading. We can't hear you.
Look at that. I muted myself. I will be tagging this program so that we can go back and hear all the great things you guys are saying. One of the things, and the fact that I'm having an issue with my own device because of my own stupidity, but it does get to kind of an interesting conversation I think you had with Commissioner Rosenworcel today. Got it right in the rehearsal, not now. But it brings up an interesting point of, there's the issue of access. Clearly, there's, kids who can't get access for homework. But then you also have the affordability aspect of it. But you also have the device side. And I have to wonder, just given the challenges, just, with not unmuting, with headphones that don't work, whatever it might be, that might be the biggest challenge, is just that whole device in the home. But maybe one of you or both of you can talk to kind of this whole thing of where do those divides exist? How do we bridge them?
So I'll start off. So I think there's a number of divides that are out there, right? I think it's connectivity, it's affordability, and then it's access to something, a tool to use. And then the other piece I would throw in is maybe the fourth piece is platforms. Thinking about what platforms are secure, which ones are effective. How you, and again, if you're thinking about, how you do a meeting, it's one thing. How you keep 25 or 30 kids entertained or focused is another. So yeah, we see that as a big challenge in terms of accessibility. And I love it when you see stories like Nemont up in Montana, giving 400 Chromebooks out to their kids. The stories that I'm hearing from NTCA member companies who are saying, look, I will go to the school and figure out which kids don't have connectivity. But on top of that, I know that they're going to need iPads, or they're going to need a device, or they're going to need a Chromebook. And what does that look like? There have been a number of nonprofit groups that have reached out to me to say, would you use your platform to give a shout out to companies to, give excess equipment if they've got it. So there's so many different factors when we talk about, what are some of these barriers? There's a lot of barriers. And then there's simply the ineptness that I tend to demonstrate learning a new platform. So, I'll throw that in as well.
Mm-hmm. To add there, Tanya?
Oh, no, yeah, Shirley covered it. Great. I do think we all have to become proficient in a platform and kind of stick to it so that we are able to become experts in whichever one we choose. When it comes to virtual meetings, I think it's great that, they have these better platforms out there, but we're all having to learn something new and getting used to doing those things. But it's important. It's part of our new normal.
Well, it's interesting. As you look at these devices, there's a divide that happens with applications. Like I refuse to download Instagram or TikTok or some of these new applications for various reasons. And yet that kind of puts me on a divide of people who are using it and aren't, right? So it's interesting the way. Go ahead.
It's funny you would say that because you're absolutely right. I actually did a discussion with somebody who was doing, we were doing an interview for Quibi, which is the new trendy 10-minute segments. And I love the fact that the host, as she and I were getting ready to have this chat, which was a 50-minute chat that's going to be condensed to a 6-minute interview, she had to remind me that the audience is young and trendy. So I was like, oh, so don't be an old lady and wander on about something. But so that was really fun. The other thing is you're talking about platforms that I thought was really interesting that's worth sharing is I had a conversation with a member of Congress this week who had called on something. And when we were talking, she said, I'm really struggling because we in Congress need to come up with a platform that will allow us to hold congressional hearings. She said, look, at this point, we're looking at things like Facebook Live. And she's like, but there can only be 4 speakers or 4 hosts when we do that. She's like, I got 50 people on a committee. Mm-hmm. So she was like, so I task you with figuring out a platform. I was like, okay, I may be in the technology world. I am not a platform developer. But I thought it was fascinating that here we have it at the highest levels of our government, those who have access to the most innovative brains and certainly can tap, all of our big tech companies. They too are struggling right now with how do we do business differently? And they still haven't figured it out. I mean, there's a part of me that's like, I kind of wish you guys had the secret sauce and figured this out a month ago, because I don't know what you were thinking that this was all going to go away. But I just thought that was really interesting.
We have to be very thankful that Blackberries finally did, go away, because everyone on the Hill always had Blackberries.
I love BlackBerry, for the record. It was my favorite device.
Boy, that's probably telling some of the people, hopefully some of the people watching this are young enough that they don't even know what a BlackBerry is, right? I think it's something that,
They know what Quibi is, though.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Although I saw a review yesterday by a millennial suggesting that they really missed the mark on that. And I haven't tried it myself, but have you guys tried it?
So I actually, because I actually have to watch the episode that I'm doing, and get a feel for what the platform was. I did download it you can get 3 months free. No, you know what? It totally does not satisfy my appetite. You know what? If I'm going to watch a story, I want the beginning, middle, and end. This like 10-minute bites. Yeah. I mean, what I found myself doing with this one little thing that I got sucked into is I just kept hitting the next thing. And I was like, just show me the thing.
Right.
So anyway, it was, maybe
that's that was me. The millennials review, I think, in a nutshell, is a similar experience.
Well, I think the younger generation
I'm cool and trendy.
I think the younger generation has adapted very well to all of these online platforms because that's what they do. I mean, my children are quite happy, FaceTiming and doing everything on their computer because they did a lot of that beforehand.
Yeah, it truly is an amazing time. My son is at our dinner table from Australia every Saturday, right? And it's like he's at the dinner table. So it's and you can see where it's going with holograms and 3D or virtual reality and so forth. Right. Back to your comment about the virtual governance. It's interesting that there's these technological issues that kind of inhibit that. Do you see kind of this willingness to try that where it kind of changes the dynamics of maybe even Washington D.C.?
So I think it'll be interesting to see. I think we'll get a taste of that next week when the Supreme Court does their first oral arguments over a teleconference setup. So that will be the first step.
Hey, the 1980s.
I go figure. But you know, the piece that we can't forget, though, and Tanya raised it, it's the human piece, it's the connection piece, it's the ability to look somebody in the eye and have a discussion about how important something is, or what it really means, or what the challenges really are. Because otherwise, I worry that if it's, you know, people are just submitting word, it just becomes words, and we drown in words, and we lose the backstory. And I worry about that. I worry about that when we talk about governance, because I think even from the very start of this country, one of the founding platforms was the ability, you know, the freedom of speech. And yeah, speech can take on a lot of different, ways of looking at it. But I still think that it is really important to have those who represent individuals or entities or communities have the ability to actually hear. And I think we're kind of all very sensory. So I think we'll have to find solutions as we go forward to minimize human contact and at the same time keep that human connection.
I'm just having like the physical cues of discussions of people, and I can see where that's extremely important as you're talking to our policymakers, of just seeing their passion. I mean, you can see a little bit over the screen, but you know, reading a room, the tone, it's just nothing's ever going to be in person.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that article, I referenced it last week about the importance of actually just body movement as you're doing these things. We probably shouldn't be sitting down. We should probably be standing up as we're having this conversation. From the way they actually meet, though, could you envision a scenario where maybe instead of Congress meeting in session physically all the time, maybe they do it for 3 months of the year, and then the other 3 months they're back in their district doing it, and that's the kind of thing I'm wondering if might change.
And I think the beauty of that is, I think sometimes members of Congress in particular can become too much of a creature of Washington. And I think the idea that you're grounded back, living among the people that you represent the majority of your time, which is not the way it is structured now, I think would be powerful. I think in terms of really, truly understanding your district, your state, your constituency, I think there's something really to be said for kind of flipping the paradigm that we have at this point and doing that. The other thing is, honestly, a lot of members of Congress with children used to come into DC on a Monday night and do votes and leave on Thursday, and their families were back in the district. Well, now most of their families are either back in the district, which means the members of Congress never see their family, and that's just not healthy in the long run either, or their families live out here so they can spend that time together. But then you're so removed from your district. You've had a drought. You've had Joe's hardware store closed down. All of those things that are important to the community, you're just out of the cycle. So I actually really, your proposal is something that I think could be very healthy for our democratic process.
Well, and you're in Washington, D.C., so for you to say this, I mean, you live in the area, right? In the Washington, D.C. area.
I just want actually less traffic.
Yeah.
So it would be perfect. Get them all out of town.
That's funny. It does seem like an opportunity, though, to kind of look at things differently. And one of the things that I think there's been some movement on, the idea of even taking some of the executive branch type stuff, I guess, if you will, or some of the regulatory stuff and shifting it out of Washington, D.C. Do you see that as a trend?
So that definitely, Department of Agriculture has done that over the course of this year. So they moved a couple of their big divisions to the Midwest. I'm not necessarily sure what I think about that. I think there is something to be said of consolidation of some of the expertise. If you're, dealing with different issues, I have to reach out to Kansas City, and then I've got to reach out to Texas, and I've got to reach out. There is something to be said for being able to walk the halls of USDA and know that you're walking down the rural development section, that I can bop into RUS, that I can touch base with the RD people. So I tend to think that there is some value and some synergy of keeping some of those things more connected. But the other thing I'll throw out that I think is going to be a big challenge that better minds than mine have to figure out is how they can do electronic voting. And I think given all the cybersecurity concerns and network integrity, I think that is one of the pieces that they struggle with. So to go to your format of that more time out in back home until they figure out a way that they can actually verify, vote integrity, that's going to be a tougher nut to crack.
Interesting. Yeah, it's hard to kind of still, actually take a person and mask their identity in real life, right? But obviously we know about virtual life.
Yeah. I keep thinking though, like, just you get on a FaceTime and it's like, this is Shirley, I vote no. I don't know. There's a part of me that says it's 535 individuals. How hard can it be? But clearly it's hard. And obviously if, the bad actors, it's the first place they would go, right? The ultimate hack would be hacking a congressional vote.
Right. Yeah, but it does seem like there's an opportunity there, just as there's an opportunity for having a platform that allows them to communicate securely and do those things. Speaking of security, one of the things that I got an email across my desk the other day about NTCA has really kind of stepped it up, it looks like, in terms of providing cybersecurity kind of forum, even beyond a forum, it sounds like.
It is it's an information sharing platform that we have created. And we are proud to be working with Tanya's firm Plus One in terms of actually educating people about this platform. But what it essentially is, Ken, is it's a platform that is secure, that as people come into the platform, we train them and they will get daily, hourly, weekly updates about what is happening on small provider networks. So a lot of the information that you won't see, but it's extremely helpful to know, what are the hacks, what are the malwares that are going around, where are the phishing attempts, how are bad actors kind of coming at small networks and then utilizing that platform to help protect themselves. We did a pilot last year. We had a grant from the Department of Homeland Security. It was wildly successful. So we are really excited about this platform because, again, even with this instance, I've already had my credit card hacked during the pandemic. It's going to bring out even more bad actors. So, it's protecting your networks and protecting the networks our companies manage is going to be even more important. And we think this tool does that. And you don't need to hire another staff person. It's a win-win.
Nice.
Yeah, and another great thing about the Cybershare is it also provides a forum for the IT folks within the NTCA member companies to share ideas and thoughts, and also speaking their own language because they are very technical people. So it really does hit the mark on so many benefits, especially for rural providers. And it is getting good take rates. So
yeah, I saw a quote there from Frank Bulk and a couple other folks I know. So it must be good. Frank is putting a quote up there, but it also, it's you guys have been doing this for a number of years, NTCA members in terms of NIST, following the guidelines and so forth, and really pushing that through, right?
We've been very engaged, and we actually have a seat on all of the critical councils. So up until our seat at the table, there was nobody representing the small carriers there. It was always the big companies. So it's been actually really valuable for government to actually hear our perspective, and also for us to get that information that we can take back to our membership. That's helped us not only in this arena, but also even in things like working with CISA Council and FEMA in terms of trying to get PPE equipment out to our members. All of those relationships kind of build on having that seat at the table.
And that leads to the whole idea of, and it gets back to the physical, interactions, right? It's knowing people that, you build these relationships, and someday, right, that relationship may be tangential, but you can help someone else or vice versa, right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And that's what we have found. And that just keeps kicking open more doors. And that is actually, honestly, one of the things that kicked open the door. I had a chance to sit on the CISRIC, which is the Cybersecurity Council for the FCC, Most of that discussion was way over my head. But again, important to be there to say, okay, how does E911 impact rural telcos? How does, some of the different platforms we're looking at impact? And like I said, even the ability to kind of really understand more about how to protect small carrier networks, which led to our Cybershare program, really came from having some of those seats at the table with NIST and others.
And I can imagine Cybershare would really be helpful if you're a small operator and you're the only IT person in that company, right? You have no one to kind of kick ideas off of, right?
Absolutely. And it also helps, these companies, Shirley's members, they're providing the IT services and solutions for the small businesses in their communities. So, the benefits of this program doesn't live just within the NTCA member company, the broadband company. It really does benefit the communities that they serve.
And Tanya, while you've got the floor, one of the things you pointed out is you've been on a lot of Zoom or these kind of video conferencing calls this past week, in fact. And why don't you tell us about some of the members? You've been going out to these members, but you've been doing it virtually. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that experience, kind of bringing it back to that conversation?
We've had to pivot just like everyone else. I was actually supposed to be in North Dakota this week doing trainings, and instead we were able to do trainings on customer experience trainings, on Zoom calls. And we did about 12 hours of them throughout this week. And, there were some really great aspects to it, being able to see everyone. People had their name and their department, which was wonderful. So it's kind of like that virtual name badge where you don't have to have that awkward time of like looking at their jacket to see people's names. But again, it doesn't beat the in-person, but we were still able to accomplish what we needed to with the staff, with the company, gather information. There was a great deal of interaction, just, people talking on the video and people wanting to use a chat function. So we did, we walked away this week thinking, you know what? I think this is, how we might be doing these things, going forward. And, so far everyone's happy. So that's a good sign. But you're right, Ken, most of my job has always been going out to these companies, being with the staff, learning, seeing all of the physical cues in their environments. So that does put you a bit at a disadvantage. But, you have to do a little bit more homework. You gotta work a little bit harder to get the information you need in order to make, solid recommendations so that these companies are successful. I miss going to meetings. I do. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a very social person. I like to see and talk to people. And I think we're going to get back there at some point in time, just probably not as often and probably not as big. But, when webinars came out, everyone was like, oh, is this going to displace, training, on-site training? Well, it didn't displace it at all. It just was another option. So I think we'll just be having a mix of these things going forward, but it's doable. And that's the great thing.
Yeah, you just kind of triggered a thought I hadn't thought of until you just triggered it. And that was that there's been many of these video shoots where I've been kind of shooting the story of one of your members or whatever. And I happen to notice a brochure or something, and that leads to a whole nother story. I remember Will down in South Carolina. I'm failing to think of his name right now, but his company. But they had just done this telemedicine pilot project. This was about 6 or 7 years ago. And that became a whole nother little story. We did like 2 or 3 different stories with them that had nothing to do. We wouldn't have known about them had we just communicated like this, right? If we'd stayed on topic. But that ability to go off topic, I suppose, which I'm really good at going off topic, as you can tell. So we probably should get to wrapping it up here. And one of the things that I have to ask, I guess it's really 2 questions. What will you miss least about being on shutdown, and what will you miss most about shutdown?
Oh, that is a trick question. So what I will miss least is the inability to derive energy directly from working with people. I miss my staff. I really do. And we do face-to-face interactions on video chat. But you know what? I miss the energy of being in the office. I miss the energy of walking down the hall and saying, "What do you think? What do we do?" You know, that spontaneity, that kind of how it just can breed organically. So I very, very much miss that. That's a big part of how I drive my energy. You know what? Honestly, I will miss working with my dog. It's hilarious. I get my second cup of coffee in the morning and she starts standing in the doorway. I work in the family room area. My husband has this study. And she like literally stands there and waits for me. And as soon as I grab that second cup, she comes back. She crawls up on her spot on the couch, which is next to where I sit. And she's like, "Let's go." I will miss that.
You have to start a dog at work policy at NTCA, I guess.
We've thought about it many a time. Landlord's not quite so excited about it as we are.
And working from home and all of my staff around the country, we're all virtual. So yeah, we let pets in at any one thing that is getting kind of old in this whole thing is I'm tired of sitting all the time. I need to get a stand-up desk. I mean, I'm used to walking, to different conferences, different meeting rooms, through airports. I just feel like I'm sitting all the time. So I'm not going to miss all of this sitting around and then having to, work extra hard to stay healthy. Don't tell this, but I'm not going to miss living with my mother. I love her.
Wait, now do I have to edit this out now?
But, one thing that has been really great is as much as I do miss travel, I don't miss being stuck in airports. That's the one thing. I do not miss being stuck in airports and canceled flights. That has been a huge benefit of this whole thing. But I think everyone working together, we're gonna get through this. We're gonna have a lot of great stories. We're clearly gonna be, Shirley and I were talking yesterday, we're clearly gonna be accessorizing with masks. So it's a whole new industry. We gotta figure out a way
a whole new look. And maybe gloves.
I was looking, I have a specially designed mask that I had put on Twitter earlier about a month ago, but it's not within your shot. Speaking of promotions, this was unintentional. I had mentioned it to Shirley before when the meeting started. I was going to change my shirt, but I didn't because this morning when it was dark, I found this without even knowing I was wearing it. And so this is kind of a classic shirt.
You're welcome.
It's also pretty old. I think it's probably about 13 years old. So anyway.
Same logo.
And it, well, I really appreciate having you guys here today. It was great fun. Next week, tune in because we're going to have, it looks like Anna Dietrich from CAMI, and I'll tell you who she is, and Daryl Swanson from Swanson Aviation, I think. But they're going to, CAMI is the Community Air Mobility Initiative. I actually remember the acronym. And what they're doing is they're trying to socialize the whole idea of these, the vertical takeoff electric VTOL things that are going to hover around in cities they're talking about. They're trying to get communities accustomed to and embrace that technology because it's going to have huge societal impacts. But the biggest impact may be in rural areas, especially initially, because really what they're talking about is an operational cost that's much less than traditional air travel. And so maybe 7,500 miles away, these communities can be revived. So I've been following it because I think there's a very interesting rural play here for transporting people and cargo. So that's next week. So I will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And once you stick around, I'm just going to end the stream.